The wailing echoed through the makeshift shelter, a sound so piercing it seemed to cut through bone. Commander Elias Reed gripped his spear tighter, his knuckles white against the rough wood. The alien infant's cries had drawn 3 predators already, and night was falling fast on this god-forsaken moon. Outside, blue-furred beasts circled in the growing darkness, their low growls forming a grim counterpoint to the baby's screams. "Make it stop," hissed Jorvik, the expedition's navigator, his face haggard from 3 sleepless nights. "That thing will get us all killed." The alien mother, Naya she'd called herself, pressed her blue-skinned child tighter to her chest, rocking desperately. Her silver eyes, large and luminous in her angular face, brimmed with exhaustion and fear. The baby's 6-fingered hands flailed against her tattered clothing. "I cannot," she whispered in her halting English. "The child senses death, calls for help, cannot stop." Reed grimaced. Of the 12 expedition members who'd crash-landed on Proxima B, only 5 remained alive. This alien female and her infant had appeared yesterday, emerging from the dense purple forest with wounds suggesting she'd barely escaped a slaughter. Communication was limited, but Reed understood enough. Her village had been destroyed. She was the lone survivor, besides her child. "We move at first light," Reed decided, wiping sweat from his brow despite the plummeting temperature. "Those cat things will break through eventually." A crash against the barricaded door made everyone flinch. The baby's wails intensified. "We won't last till morning," Jorvik said, glancing nervously at their dwindling supplies. "Not with that beacon screaming our location." Reed knew Jorvik was right. The emergency beacon from their ship was destroyed. But this child, this impossibly loud child, had become a living homing signal for every predator within 5 miles. He studied the alien mother, noting how similar she was to humans despite her blue skin and silver eyes. Her people were called the Kirath, if he understood correctly. Before the expedition went catastrophically wrong, the xenobiologists had theorized that this moon harbored sentient life, but no one expected beings so eerily humanoid. The baby screeched again, a sound so agonizing that Reed felt it like a physical blow. He'd lost his own child back on Earth, a memory he'd buried beneath military discipline and the ambition that had driven him to lead this doomed expedition. Something ancient and primal stirred within him. "Give it to me," he said suddenly, extending his arms toward Naya. The alien mother clutched her child protectively, silver eyes widening. "I won't hurt it," Reed assured her, softening his voice. "Please." Perhaps it was desperation or something she recognized in his eyes, but Naya slowly, reluctantly, handed over her wailing infant. The moment the child touched Reed's calloused hands, the crying stopped. A stunned silence fell over the shelter, broken only by the continued growls outside. The infant's silver eyes, identical to its mother's, stared up at Reed with sudden fascination. 6 tiny fingers wrapped around Reed's thumb with surprising strength. "What did you do?" Jorvik asked, bewildered. Reed shook his head, equally mystified. "I don't know." Naya was staring at him now, her expression unreadable. "You have lost child," she said, touching her chest where her heart would be, if her anatomy was anything like human. "Child knows, feels." Reed felt his throat tighten. "That's impossible. My people, feel, know." She tapped her temple. Not words, deeper. The baby cooed now, a sound almost musical, as it nestled against Reed's chest. Outside, the growling grew more distant. "They're leaving," whispered Adrian, their biologist, peering through a crack in the barricade. "The predators are actually leaving." Reed looked down at the alien child in his arms. Its skin was softer than he expected, warm like a human baby's. For the first time since the crash, he felt something other than grim determination to survive, something he'd thought had died with his son back on Earth. "What's its name?" he asked. Naya's face softened. "Elio means hope in our language." "Elio," Reed repeated, feeling the weight of the name, the weight of the child, of responsibility. Beyond the shelter walls, a new sound arose, the haunting, distant howl of something much larger than the cat creatures. Something hunting. Reed knew then that their journey had only begun. Dawn broke in shades of crimson and gold over the alien landscape. Reed led the small group through dense underbrush, the leaves a deep purple that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. The air was thick with moisture, carrying scents of decay and growth in equal measure. Behind him trudged Jorvik, Adrian, and Chen, their engineer, all carrying makeshift weapons fashioned from ship debris and native materials. Naya moved with surprising grace despite her injuries, keeping pace easily. Reed still carried Elio, the infant now quiet and alert, watching the canopy above with silver eyes that seemed too knowing for a creature so young. The hunting parties come at dark, Naya explained, as they rested briefly beside a stream of water that glowed faintly blue. Blue fangs first, then howlers. The cat things and whatever made that sound last night? Adrian asked, documenting everything in a small notebook that had survived the crash. Naya nodded. Howlers hunt blue fangs, hunt us, hunt everything. Reed dipped his hand in the stream, finding it cool and slick, almost oily to the touch. Testing equipment had been lost in the crash, but necessity had forced them to trust the alien environment, at least partially. So far, the water hadn't killed them. How far to your people? Reed asked, allowing Elio to grasp at his fingers. The baby made chirping sounds that somehow conveyed contentment. Sorrow passed over Naya's features. My village destroyed. Few Kir-Ath remain. The Great Valley, maybe. 6 days' journey. She pointed toward distant mountains that shimmered like mirages on the horizon. 6 days, Chen muttered, examining his makeshift spear. Once a brilliant technician, he now focused his engineering mind on perfecting the balance of primitive weapons. Through territory with predators that hunt by sound, and we have a baby that screams like a siren. Elio, quiet with him, Naya said, gesturing at Reed with something like reverence. Old bond, rare. Reed felt the other's eyes on him. I'm not special, he said firmly. The baby just, I don't know. Babies sometimes calm with certain people. My people believe in soul threads, Naya said, touching the intricate patterns tattooed along her arms. Sometimes souls meet again across stars. Jorvik snorted. Superstition. We're stranded on an alien moon with no rescue coming, Adrian pointed out. I'm open to a little superstition if it keeps that baby quiet. Reed stood abruptly, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. We need to cover more ground before nightfall. He handed Elio back to Naya, and the group continued their trek through the alien wilderness. They had gone perhaps 2 miles when Reed felt it, a vibration through the soles of his boots. He raised his hand, signaling a halt. Something's coming, he whispered. The forest had gone silent. Even the strange chittering insects that had provided constant background noise had fallen still. Elio, sensing the tension, began to whimper. No, no, little one, Reed said, quickly taking the infant from Naya. Immediately the baby quieted, staring up at him with trust that felt unearned. The vibrations grew stronger, rhythmic, deliberate. It's not an animal, Chen realized, his eyes widening. That's bipedal movement. Multiple individuals. Reed gestured everyone into the dense underbrush. They crouched, weapons ready, as the sound of footsteps grew louder. Through the purple foliage, they caught glimpses of blue skin. Kir-Ath, like Naya, but adorned in what appeared to be armor crafted from the bones and hides of native creatures. Their faces were painted with intricate patterns that extended down their necks and arms, similar to Naya's tattoos but more elaborate. Each carried a spear tipped with a crystalline material that caught the alien sunlight in flashes of brilliant color. Warriors, Naya breathed, a mixture of relief and apprehension in her voice. From the high cliffs. One of the warriors suddenly froze, head tilting. Before Reed could react, the alien's gaze locked directly onto their hiding place. A sharp command in an unfamiliar language brought the entire party to attention, spears raised. Stay down, Reed ordered his people. But Naya was already standing, calling out in her native tongue. She emerged from the underbrush, hands raised in what Reed hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The warriors responded with sharp, aggressive sounds. Reed couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Threat, suspicion, hostility. Elio chose that moment to squirm in Reed's arms, making a high, trilling sound. The warriors fell silent. Then, moving with unnerving coordination, they parted to reveal a taller figure adorned in more elaborate bone armor. This newcomer's face bore scars that had been filled with some glittering substance, creating patterns that seemed to shift in the dappled light. When he spoke, his voice was deeper, resonant. Naya responded with obvious deference, gesturing repeatedly toward the underbrush where Reed and the others remained hidden. "What's happening?" Jorvik whispered. "She's vouching for us," Adrienne guessed, explaining. The lead warrior raised a hand, and Naya fell silent. He barked what was clearly an order. Naya turned toward the hiding place. "You must come. Show yourselves. Bring Elio." Reed hesitated, then nodded to his people. One by one they emerged from hiding, weapons lowered but not discarded. Reed came last, the alien child still cradled protectively against his chest. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The warriors' postures changed, spears lowering, expressions shifting from hostility to something more complex, wonder perhaps, or superstition. The leader approached Reed slowly, eyes fixed not on the human but on the child in his arms. He spoke, his tone now reverent. "He says you carry Kirva, destiny," Naya translated. "The child bonds with you. This is sacred sign." The leader raised his hand toward Reed's face. Behind him, Chen gripped his weapon tighter, but Reed gave a subtle headshake. He held his ground as the alien warrior touched his forehead with a six-fingered hand. "What's he doing?" Reed asked through gritted teeth. "Reading," Naya said simply. "Your soul." After a long, tense moment, the warrior stepped back. He spoke again, this time directly to Reed as if expecting to be understood. "He says you have warrior spirit, have known great loss, are worthy to protect Kirva." Naya's voice carried a new respect. "They will take us to the Great Valley. You will be honored." Reed looked down at Elio, who gazed back with those disconcerting silver eyes. For a moment he could have sworn he felt something, a presence, a touch against his consciousness, feather light but undeniably there. "Tell them we accept their protection," Reed said, surprised at the steadiness in his voice. As Naya translated, the warriors formed a protective formation around the humans. The leader beckoned, then turned toward the mountains shimmering on the horizon. Reed fell into step beside Naya. "What aren't you telling me about this child?" he asked quietly. Naya's expression was solemn. "Among my people, such bonds are prophecy. Elio is not ordinary child. Born during eclipse, when barriers between worlds thin, such children are conduits." "Conduits for what?" "Change," she said simply. "Great change." Reed wanted to dismiss this as primitive superstition, but Elio trilled again, tiny six-fingered hand reaching up to touch his face. And there it was again, that whisper touch against his mind, a feeling of connection so profound it took his breath away. Whatever waited in the Great Valley, Reed knew with sudden, inexplicable certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The journey to the Great Valley proved arduous even with the Kirath warriors as guides and protectors. They traveled mainly at night, when the larger predators were less active, resting during the burning daylight hours beneath hastily constructed shelters of purple fronds and crystalline growths that the Kirath harvested from certain trees. Reed learned that the warrior leader was called Thane, a title rather than a name. His actual name, unpronounceable to human tongues, translated roughly as "he who walks between worlds." The other warriors treated him with reverence bordering on fear. By the third night, Reed had begun to notice subtle changes in Elio. The infant's silver eyes sometimes caught the light of Proxima B's 3 moons and seemed to reflect it differently, patterns of light that shouldn't be possible. And the mental touches had grown stronger, no longer mere impressions, but distinct emotions. Curiosity, contentment, occasional flashes of alarm when unfamiliar sounds echoed through the forest. "The bond grows," Naya observed, as they rested at dawn on the 4th day. The Great Valley was visible now, a vast depression in the land ahead where the purple forest gave way to a landscape of towering crystalline formations and flowing water. Reed nodded, watching as Elio slept peacefully in his arms. "I feel it, but I don't understand it." "Not for understanding," Naya said, her English improving daily through constant interaction. "For experiencing, for becoming." "Becoming what?" Reed asked. a note of frustration creeping into his voice. Naya's expression grew distant. My people have legend. When stars align, when soul threads connect between different kinds, change comes. Last time was 1,000 years past, when the Skyfire fell. A meteorite, Adrian suggested, always listening, always documenting. Brought metal that does not exist here, Naya confirmed. Changed everything. Before we lived in caves, dirt we built, learned, grew. She gestured at the intricate bone armor the warriors wore, the woven fabrics of her own clothing. All because of bond like yours with Elio. Reed looked skeptically at the sleeping infant. You're saying this baby is going to… What? Revolutionize your society? Not baby, Naya corrected. Bond, connection between worlds. She touched Reed's chest, then her own. Human, Kirath, together. Thane approached then, ending the conversation. He'd been watching Reed closely throughout their journey, his scarred face unreadable. Now he gestured toward the valley ahead, speaking in his resonant voice. He says we must reach the sacred pools by nightfall, Naya translated. The howlers gather, many more than usual. They sense something coming. The baby? Chen asked. Naya shook her head. Something else. Something… She struggled for the word. Bigger. Reed felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn air. Tell them we're ready to move out. As they descended into the Great Valley, the landscape transformed dramatically. The purple forest gave way to open spaces dotted with crystal formations that towered hundreds of feet into the air, refracting the alien sunlight into rainbows that danced across the ground. Between these formations flowed streams of the same luminescent blue water they'd encountered earlier, converging toward the center of the valley. Beautiful, Adrian breathed, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten. Kirvatol, Naya said, sacred place, where life began. The Kurath village became visible as they descended further, structures built into and around the crystal formations, connected by bridges of woven fiber and bone. Kirath moved among these structures, blue skin and silver eyes catching the rainbow light. Their arrival caused an immediate sensation. Kirath stopped their activities, staring as Thane led the strange procession into the heart of their settlement. Children, startlingly similar to human children except for their coloration, peeked from behind adults, curious and unafraid. They were led to a central plaza where a pool of the luminescent blue water formed a perfect circle, its surface unnaturally still, despite the streams feeding into it. Around this pool stood older Kirath, their blue skin faded to a paler hue, their bodies adorned with the same intricate tattoos that covered Naya's arms but extended across their entire visible skin. Thane spoke at length, gesturing toward Reed and Elio, occasionally indicating the other humans as well. The elders listened impassively, their silver eyes revealing nothing. Finally, one stepped forward, female, ancient, her movements deliberate yet graceful. She approached Reed without hesitation, eyes fixed on Elio. The seer, Naya whispered. Oldest of our people. The seer reached out gnarled, six-fingered hands. The meaning was clear. She wanted to hold Elio. Reed hesitated, surprised by his own reluctance. Over the journey, his attachment to the alien child had grown into something fierce and protective. The thought of relinquishing Elio, even temporarily, caused an almost physical discomfort. It is necessary, Naya said gently. Trust. After a moment, Reed carefully transferred the infant to the seer's waiting arms. Elio's eyes opened, silver meeting silver, and for a heartbeat, Reed feared the baby would wail as it had done whenever anyone but him held it. Instead, Elio made a soft, trilling sound, reaching up to touch the seer's face with tiny blue fingers. The seer closed her eyes, swaying slightly. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly strong, musical in its cadence. She says the threads are strong, Naya translated. She sees fire in the sky, darkness following, a choice that must be made. Naya frowned, struggling with the next part. She says, you carry death within you, human, and life, two sides of same coin. The seer opened her eyes, looking directly at Reed with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. She spoke again, a single phrase that seemed to resonate through the crystal formation surrounding them. The breaking is coming, Naya translated, her voice barely above a whisper. And after breaking, remaking. The seer returned Elio to Reed's arms. The baby immediately snuggled against his chest, making those strange, musical trilling sounds. The mental touch came stronger than ever. Not just emotion now, but a distinct impression. Danger coming soon. As if in response to this thought, a distant howl echoed across the valley, closer than it should be, more guttural and hungry than the sounds they had heard in the forest. The Kirath warriors stiffened, hands moving to weapons. Thane barked orders, and the village erupted into coordinated activity. "What's happening?" Reed demanded. "Howlers," Nia said, fear evident in her voice. "Many, too many, coming now, during daylight. This never happens." "They're changing their behavior," Adrienne realized. "Something's driving them." Thane approached, speaking urgently to Naya. "He says we must prepare for battle," she translated. "The Howlers have surrounded the valley. All exits blocked. They hunt, specifically, hunt Elio." Reed tightened his grip on the infant. "How is that possible? How would they know?" "Elio is changed," Naya said simply. "All things fear change." Around them, Kirath warriors were distributing weapons, spears tipped with the same crystalline material that formed the towering structures, bows strung with fibers that gleamed like metal in the sunlight, arrows fletched with iridescent feathers from creatures Reed had yet to encounter. Thane presented Reed with a sword, a beautiful, deadly creation of bone and crystal, its edge honed to microscopic sharpness. The handle fit Reed's hand as if made for him. "For Kirva's guardian," Naya translated as Thane spoke. "Bound by soul thread, bound by destiny." Reed took the weapon, feeling its perfect balance. His military training had included bladed weapons, a nod to tradition rather than practicality in an age of advanced technology. Now, stranded on this alien moon, those skills might make the difference between survival and death. "Tell him I'm honored," Reed said, meeting Thane's scarred gaze, "and that I'll defend Elio with my life." As Naya translated, a new sound rose from beyond the village perimeter. Not a howl this time, but a roar that shook the crystal formations, sending rainbows dancing erratically across the ground. The sound was followed by screams, Kirath voices raised in alarm and pain. "They're here," Chen said, gripping his makeshift spear tighter. Thane barked more orders. Warriors formed defensive positions around the central plaza. The elders ushered children and non-combatants into the crystal structures. "Give me Elio," Naya urged Reed. "You must fight. I will keep him safe." Reed started to protest, but another mental touch from Elio silenced him, a clear impression of agreement. Reluctantly, he transferred the infant to Naya's arms. Elio remained calm, silver eyes fixed on Reed with that unnerving intelligence. "Stay close to me," Reed told Naya. Then, to his expedition members, Formation Delta, back to back, protect each other. They barely had time to comply before the first of the Howlers burst into the plaza. Reed had glimpsed these creatures from a distance during their journey. Massive, six-limbed predators with elongated jaws and hide-like armor plate. Up close, they were even more terrifying. Each stood taller than a man, moving with a speed that belied their bulk, jaws lined with crystalline teeth that matched the weapons of the Kirath. The battle exploded into chaos. Kirath warriors engaged the beast with coordinated precision, but the Howler's strength and ferocity were overwhelming. For every creature that felled a spear or arrow, another charged forward. Reed found himself at the front line, the crystal sword singing through the air as he defended a position before Naya and Elio. Years of military training took over, his body moving through combat forms, each strike precise and deadly. A Howler lunged toward him, jaws wide enough to engulf his head. Reed sidestepped, bringing the sword down in an arc that severed one of the creature's limbs. It screamed, a sound so piercing it momentarily disoriented everyone in the plaza. "They're targeting Elio," Adrienne shouted above the din, firing a makeshift bow with surprising accuracy. "Look at their movement pattern." She was right. Despite the chaos, Reed could see the Howler's attacks converging toward where Naya stood with the infant. A particularly massive Howler, its hide scarred and mottled, broke through the defensive line. It charged directly toward Naya, moving with terrible purpose. Reed tried to intercept, but found his path blocked by two smaller specimens. "Naya!" he shouted, desperately cutting his way through. Thane appeared then, leaping between Naya and the massive howler. His crystal spear plunged into the creature's chest, a killing blow against any normal predator. But this beast merely roared, snapping the spear shaft with a shake of its massive head. With terrifying precision, it seized Thane in its jaws and bit down. The warrior's death was instantaneous, his body falling in two pieces to the blood-slick ground. Reed finally broke free from the smaller howlers, charging toward the alpha. The beast turned toward him, Thane's blood dripping from crystalline teeth. In its eyes, Reed saw something that chilled him to the core. Not just animal hunger, but intelligence, hatred, purpose. Behind him, Elio began to wail, not the piercing cry from before, but a sound deeper, resonant, that vibrated through the crystal formations surrounding the plaza. The structures began to glow, rainbow light coalescing into blinding white. The alpha howler hesitated, its attention diverted by this new development. Reed seized the opportunity, diving forward with a crystal sword extended. The blade sank deep into the creature's throat, black ichor spraying across Reed's face and chest. The howler thrashed, throwing Reed aside like a rag doll. He slammed into one of the glowing crystal formations, pain exploding through his body. The sword remained embedded in the creature's throat, but the wound wasn't immediately fatal. The beast turned toward Naya again, advancing with murderous intent. Elio's wail intensified. The ground beneath the plaza began to tremble. The pool of luminescent blue water at the center started to bubble and churn. Reed struggled to his feet, ribs screaming in protest. "Naya, the pool!" Understanding immediately, Naya ran toward the churning water, the alpha howler in pursuit. At the pool's edge, she turned to face the charging predator. Elio clutched protectively against her chest. The howler lunged, and Naya stepped aside at the last possible moment. The creature's momentum carried it directly into the pool. The moment the howler touched the luminescent water, a blinding flash erupted. The liquid seemed to come alive, wrapping around the thrashing predator like tendrils, pulling it beneath the surface. Its roars turned to gurgles, then silence. Throughout the plaza, the remaining howlers froze. As one, they raised their elongated heads, as if listening to some inaudible command. Then, with eerie coordination, they retreated, disappearing as suddenly as they had appeared. An unnatural silence fell over the village. The glowing crystal formations gradually dimmed back to their normal state. The pool settled, its surface once again unnaturally still, with no sign of the creature that had been dragged beneath. Reed limped to Naya's side. "Are you hurt? Is Elio?" "We are unharmed," she assured him, though her voice shook with reaction. She looked toward where Thane's body lay. But the price was high. Around the plaza, Kirath tended to their wounded and gathered their dead. The elders emerged from shelter, the seer among them. She surveyed the carnage with ancient, knowing eyes, then approached the pool where the alpha howler had vanished. She spoke, her musical voice carrying across the now quiet plaza. "She says the water has tasted death," Naya translated. "Now it must taste life." The seer gestured toward Elio. The meaning was clear. "No," Reed said immediately, stepping between Naya and the elder. "You're not putting that child in there." The seer regarded him calmly, then spoke again. "Not child alone," Naya translated, her voice strange. "Bond must enter. Together." Reed frowned. "Were they known?" "What does that mean?" "You and Elio," Naya clarified. "Together, in the sacred pool." Reed looked at the innocuous-seeming water, remembering how it had come alive, how it had consumed the howler. "That's insane. It killed that creature." "That was death," Naya said. "You are life bound to Elio by soul thread." "This is crazy," Jorvik interjected, limping forward. He'd taken a nasty gash to his leg during the battle. "Reed, you can't seriously be considering this primitive ritual." Reed looked at the surviving members of his expedition. Jorvik, Adrienne, Chen. They'd followed him across the stars, trusted his leadership. Now they watched him with concern and confusion as he stood at the edge of an alien mystery. "What happens if we do this?" Reed asked Naya. She conferred briefly with the seer, then turned back to Reed. "Seer says completion, breaking and remaking. The circle closes." That's not an answer, Reed pointed out. Because there is no knowing, Naya said simply. Only doing, only becoming. Reed looked down at Elio, who gazed back with those unnervingly intelligent silver eyes. The mental touch came again, stronger than ever. Not just emotion or impression now, but a clear, simple message. Trust, together, now, the decision crystallized within Reed. He held out his arms, and Naya transferred Elio to him. The infant made that trilling sound of contentment, tiny six-fingered hand resting against Reed's chest. Commander, don't, Adrienne pleaded. We don't understand what that substance is. No, Reed agreed. We don't. He stepped to the edge of the pool, Elio secure in his arms. But I think he does. Before doubt could take hold, Reed stepped into the luminescent water. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Not pain, as he'd half expected, but connection. The liquid enveloped him and Elio, glowing brighter where it touched them. Reed felt his consciousness expanding, connecting first with Elio's, that bright, curious presence he'd been sensing in fragments, and then beyond, to the land itself, to the Kirath, to the strange ecology of Proxima B. Images flooded his mind, the crash of his expedition ship, but seen from outside, as if the land itself had witnessed it. The destruction of Naya's village by howlers driven by instinctive fear of change. The ancient history of the Kirath, rising from primitive beginnings after a meteorite impact, brought the first off-world elements to their moon. And something more, a glimpse of future possibilities. Humans and Kirath working together, combining knowledge and perspectives. A civilization rising that was neither purely human nor purely alien, but something new, something stronger. Elio at its center, growing into a bridge between worlds. The vision faded. Reed found himself standing in the pool, the water now glowing with blinding intensity. Elio trilled in his arms, silver eyes reflecting the glow. Around the plaza, the Kirath had fallen to their knees, including the elders. Even Naya knelt, her expression one of awe. Reed stepped out of the pool, water streaming from his clothes but leaving no dampness behind. He felt changed, not physically, but fundamentally, as if some essential truth about existence had been written into his being. What did you see? Naya asked, rising to her feet. Everything, Reed said simply. The past, possibilities for the future. He looked down at Elio, who gazed back with perfect understanding. He's not just a child. He's a beginning. The seer approached, her ancient face serene. She spoke, and this time Reed understood her words directly, without translation, as if the pool had somehow granted him this knowledge. The breaking has come, she said. Now begins the remaking. Human who carries death and life, you are bound to us now as we are bound to you. What will you make of this bond? Reed thought of Earth, so distant now, of his lost son, of the expedition that had ended in disaster, but had led him to this moment, this crossroads between worlds. A bridge, he answered, not just between our people, but between what we are and what we could become. The seer nodded as if this was the answer she had expected. Then let it begin. 1 year later, the Great Valley had transformed. Around the crystal formations and sacred pool now stood structures that blended human engineering principles with Kirath traditional materials. Solar collectors built from salvaged expedition equipment powered climate controls within dwellings designed to accommodate both species comfortably. Reed stood at the entrance of the central meeting hall, watching as Adrienne taught a group of young Kirath the basics of Earth mathematics, while simultaneously learning their intricate system of recording history through tactile patterns, the basis of the tattoos that adorn the adults. Chen had taken Kirath apprentices, teaching them metallurgy using ores identified in the nearby mountains. Already tools of unprecedented sophistication for this world were emerging from his makeshift forge. Even Jorvik, initially the most skeptical of alien-human cooperation, had found his place, leading hunting parties that combined human tactical thinking with Kirath knowledge of the local fauna, developing sustainable harvesting practices that would ensure food security for generations. The transport returns today, Naya said, joining Reed at the entrance. Her English was fluent now, just as Reed had mastered the musical complexity of her native tongue. Reed nodded. 6 months ago, they had detected a faint signal, another human expedition, searching for survivors of the first. Rather than immediately revealing themselves, the small community had made a collective decision. They would establish contact, but on their own terms. They would demonstrate what was possible when different worlds came together in cooperation rather than conquest. "Do you think they will understand?" Naya asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Some will," Reed said. "Some won't. Change never comes easily." "But it comes," she replied with the pragmatism that had helped her survive the destruction of her village, the loss of her mate, the upheaval of everything she had known. A small blue form darted between them. Elio, no longer an infant but a toddler, growing at a rate that amazed even the Kirath elders. He possessed the quick intelligence of his mother's people, combined with a curiosity that Reed liked to think came from the human side of his unusual bond. "Flee!" Elio called, using the shortened form of father he had assigned to Reed. He held up a small model he'd constructed from crystal shards and fiber, a crude but recognizable representation of Earth, which he had never seen but knew intimately through the bond he shared with Reed. "That's beautiful, Elio," Reed said, kneeling to examine the creation. "Perfect proportions." Elio beamed, silver eyes shining. The mental touch came, now a constant, comfortable presence in Reed's mind rather than the fragmented impressions of the early days. "Show them. Like this. Together." Reed nodded, understanding the child's meaning without the need for spoken language. "That's the plan." A Kirath scout appeared at the edge of the village, making the signal that indicated the human transport had landed in the designated clearing. Representatives from both species would go to meet them, a calculated first impression. Reed lifted Elio into his arms, feeling the familiar rightness of it. The bond between them had grown and evolved over the past year, becoming something neither the Kirath nor the humans fully understood, but all recognized as significant. The seer called it the fulfillment of ancient prophecy. Adrian documented it as an unprecedented xenobiological phenomenon. Reed simply accepted it as his new reality, a connection that had filled the void left by loss and given him purpose beyond survival. "Ready?" he asked Naya. She nodded, adjusting the ceremonial garments that marked her new role as ambassador between peoples. "For change." As they walked toward the meeting point, Reed reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. From military commander to crash survivor to reluctant guardian of an alien child to something entirely new. The man who had boarded that expedition ship on Earth would never have imagined this outcome, this transformation. In his arms, Elio trilled contentedly, six-fingered hand resting against Reed's chest where the bond between them resonated strongest. Through that connection, Reed sensed not just the child's thoughts, but the promise of something larger. A future where the barriers between worlds grew thin, where difference became strength rather than division. Whatever came next, that future had already begun. The new human expedition arrived with the thunder of engines and the glint of advanced weaponry. From the ridge overlooking the clearing, Reed watched the transport settle onto alien soil, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the organic shapes of the Great Valley. 10 heavily armed soldiers emerged first, forming a perimeter around the ship. Then came the scientists and diplomats, their clean uniforms and untested equipment marking them as newcomers to this harsh world. "They bring weapons," Naya observed, her voice neutral, but her posture tense. "Many weapons." "Standard procedure," Reed explained, though the sight of those weapons, pulse rifles and sonic disruptors that made his crystal sword seem like a child's toy, stirred a familiar unease. "They don't know what to expect." Elio squirmed in Reed's arms, his mental touch conveying curiosity mingled with apprehension. The toddler had never seen other humans besides Reed's small group. Through their bond, Reed sensed the child trying to reconcile these new arrivals with the impressions of humanity he had absorbed from Reed's memories. "Remember the plan," Reed told the small delegation that had accompanied them. 3 Kirath elders, including the seer, and his 3 surviving expedition members. "Let me speak first. Stay calm no matter what happens." They descended the ridge slowly, deliberately visible. Reed had chosen to wear a blend of human expedition clothing and Kirath ceremonial garments, a physical representation of the bridge he had become. Elio remained in his arms, a living symbol of connection between worlds. The soldiers spotted them immediately. weapons raising in unison. Through microphone amplification, a sharp command carried across the clearing. Halt and identify yourselves. Reed recognized the voice, the posture, the uniform insignia. Colonel Marcus Wheeler, Borsofti Zeichelder, his former commanding officer, the man who had approved the original expedition despite the risks. The man who had once told Reed that his ambition would either make him a legend or get him killed. "This is Commander Elias Reed," he called back, continuing his advance at the same measured pace. "Sole surviving officer of Expedition Proxima. I come with representatives of the indigenous population. We come in peace." Through binoculars, Reed saw Wheeler's face contort with shock. The colonel barked orders, and the soldiers lowered their weapons, not holstering them, but no longer aiming directly at the approaching delegation. When they were 20 paces from the perimeter, Reed halted, close enough for clear communication, far enough to avoid appearing threatening. "Reed?" Wheeler stepped forward, disbelief evident in his voice. "My God, we thought you were all dead." "Not all," Reed replied evenly. "5 of us survived the crash. We've been living here with the Kirath people." Wheeler's gaze fixed on Elio, then on Naya, taking in their blue skin and silver eyes with poorly concealed shock. "You've integrated with the natives." "We've done more than that," Reed said, shifting Elio to a more comfortable position. "We've learned from each other, built something new together." A woman in the diplomatic uniform of the Earth Alliance stepped forward. "I'm Ambassador Chen Li. We're here on a combined rescue and first contact mission." Her eyes lingered on Elio. "It seems you've accelerated the contact process considerably." Reed inclined his head. "Ambassador, this is Naya, representative of the Kirath High Council, and her son, Elio." He deliberately omitted mentioning his bond with the child, wanting to gauge their reactions first. Wheeler was frowning now, his military mind assessing and finding the situation outside protocol. "Commander Reed, you and your survivor need to be debriefed immediately, and medical evaluation. You've been exposed to an alien biosphere for over a year." "We're perfectly healthy," Reed assured him. "Better than healthy, in fact. This world has much to teach us about adaptation." A scientist pushed forwards eagerly, scanner already in hand. "The blue humanoids, are they carbon-based? The similarity to human form is remarkable. Convergent evolution, perhaps? Or maybe—" "We are Kirath," Naya interrupted, her English perfect and confident. "We are people, not specimens. We have language, culture, history. We welcome scientific exchange, but as equals." The scientist blinked, clearly not expecting direct communication. Ambassador Lee recovered more quickly. "Of course, forgive our colleagues' enthusiasm. This is a historic moment." "More historic than you know," Reed said. "The Kirath have invited Earth to establish a permanent joint settlement in the Great Valley. Not a colony, not a research outpost, but a true blending of our peoples and knowledge." Wheeler scoffed. "That's not your decision to make, Reed. Earth Alliance protocols for first contact are clear." "With respect, Colonel," Reed interrupted, "those protocols were written by people who had never actually met an alien civilization, who had never seen what's possible when we move beyond seeing each other as other." Elio chose that moment to reach toward the new humans, trilling curiously. A ripple of surprise passed through the expedition members at the sound. "What is that child doing?" one of the scientists asked. "Communicating, Brown," Reed answered simply. He hesitated, then decided transparency was the best approach. "Elio and I share a connection, a bond that transcends our different origins." Wheeler's expression hardened. "What kind of connection?" "Telepathic, for lack of a better term," Reed said. "The Kirath call it a soul thread. It formed spontaneously when Elio was an infant." The revelation sent the scientists into a frenzy of whispered consultation. Ambassador Lee looked intrigued rather than alarmed, a good sign. Wheeler predictably reached for the sidearm he hadn't drawn. "You've been compromised," the colonel stated flatly. "Mind control, alien influence." Reed had anticipated this reaction. Calmly, he said, "If I were under control, Colonel, why would I have contacted your ship? Why would I be standing here proposing peaceful cooperation instead of hiding in the valley? The bond is mutual, not coercive. The seer stepped forward then, her ancient presence commanding attention despite her fragile appearance. She spoke in the Kirath language, her voice musical and carrying. Reed translated. She says that what has happened here was foretold, a joining of different worlds, beginning with one human and one Kirath child, spreading to create something greater than either alone. Superstition, Wheeler dismissed. Is it? Reed challenged. In 1 year, we've developed new alloys using Kirath crystalline materials and earth metallurgy techniques. We've created medical treatments combining their understanding of bioluminescent compounds with our knowledge of cellular biology. We've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. Ambassador Lee was listening intently now. You're proposing a joint venture rather than traditional colonization. I'm proposing a new way forward, Reed confirmed. One where neither side dominates the other, where we grow together rather than one subsuming the other. The Earth Alliance Council will never approve this, Wheeler warned. They sent us to establish a strategic outpost, not a cultural exchange program. Then perhaps the Council needs to see what we've built before making that decision, Reed suggested. He turned to the ambassador. We invite you, all of you, to visit the Great Valley, see our settlement, meet the people, then make your report. Lee considered, then nodded. A first-hand assessment would be valuable. Colonel, I believe this falls under my diplomatic authority. Wheeler clearly wanted to object, but was constrained by the mission parameters. My security team accompanies you at all times, he insisted. Of course, Reed agreed, but weapons remain powered down within the valley. That's non-negotiable. For a tense moment, it seemed Wheeler might refuse. Then grudgingly he nodded. Powered down, not surrendered. Acceptable, Reed said. He glanced at Naya, who gave a slight nod of approval. 3 days later, Reed stood at the edge of the sacred pool, watching as Earth scientists and Kirath elders conducted what could only be described as a religious scientific summit. The scientists' instruments hovered over the luminescent water, while the elders chanted in their musical language. Between them, Adrian facilitated, having become fluent in both the technical jargon of earth science and the metaphorical language the Kirath used to describe natural phenomena. They still don't quite understand each other, Naya observed, standing beside him. But they're trying. It's a start, Reed agreed. The visit had gone better than he'd dared hope. Ambassador Lee had proven genuinely open-minded, fascinated by the hybrid society taking shape in the valley. Most of the scientists had quickly moved past their initial objectifying approach, humbled by the sophisticated knowledge the Kirath possessed about their world. Even some of Wheeler's security team had begun to relax, participating in hunting expeditions with Jorvik and the Kirath warriors. Wheeler himself remained skeptical, maintaining a professional distance. But Reed had caught him watching Elio with reluctant fascination as the toddler played with both human and Kirath children, moving effortlessly between worlds in a way the adults couldn't quite manage. They leave tomorrow, Naya said. What will their report say? Ambassador Lee supports the joint settlement proposal, Reed replied. 3 of the 5 scientists back her. Wheeler will express security concerns, but won't actively oppose it. You seem certain, Reed smiled faintly. Let's just say Elio and I had a chat with the colonel last night. Naya raised an eyebrow. You used the bond to influence him? No, Reed said firmly. We showed him. I asked Elio to share his perspective, what it feels like to exist between worlds, to see through both human and Kirath eyes. He paused, remembering Wheeler's stunned expression when the mental touch had first connected them. I don't think anyone's ever refused to listen to Elio, once they've felt what he can share. A commotion at the edge of the plaza drew their attention. A group of Earth scientists were gesturing excitedly at readings on their instruments, while several Kirath elders nodded in apparent understanding. What's happening? Reed asked as they approached. Breakthrough, one of the scientists, Dr. Levine, explained, barely containing her excitement. The Kirath have been telling us that the luminescent water is living memory. We thought it was metaphorical, but our scans show it contains complex organic compounds that store and transmit information similar to neural networks. It's a biological data storage system, one that's apparently compatible with both human and Kirath neurophysiology. The seer spoke, and Reed translated automatically. The waters remember. They learn, they They connect. This is why the bond between the human who carries death and life in the child of change was possible. The waters prepared the way. Dr. Levine nodded eagerly. If we can understand how this works, the applications would be revolutionary. Imagine direct memory transfer, shared experiences across species boundaries, preservation of knowledge in a form that transcends language barriers. Careful, Doctor, Reed cautioned. Remember that this isn't just a resource to be exploited. It's sacred to the Kirath, and it's alive in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Of course, Levine said, though her eyes still gleamed with scientific ambition. Collaborative research only, with full Kirath participation and guidance. As the scientists and elders resumed their discussion, Reed felt a familiar mental touch. He turned to see Elio approaching, hand in hand with a young Earth scientist who looked simultaneously bewildered and delighted. "Fa!" Elio called. "Showed Dr. Hayes the stars." From inside, the scientist, Hayes, looked at Reed with wonder. He showed me the constellations as the Kirath see them, not just visually, but their meanings, their stories. I felt it. She shook her head. Nothing in my training prepared me for this. Few things could, Reed acknowledged. Elio has a gift for bridging worlds. He's not the only one, Hayes said, studying Reed with new interest. You've changed, Commander. You're not fully human anymore, are you? The question might have offended Reed once, now he simply smiled. I'm still human, but perhaps being human is more expansive than we previously understood. Elio tugged at Reed's hand, silver eyes serious. The mental touch conveyed urgency. Time soon. Sky change. Reed nodded, understanding immediately. Excuse us, Doctor. There's something we need to prepare for. He led Elio to the highest point in the village, a crystal formation that overlooked both the valley and the night sky beyond. Naya joined them, as did the seer, and after a moment's hesitation, Ambassador Lee. What are we waiting for? Lee asked. Convergence, the seer answered through Reed's translation, the moment when paths align. As the 3 moons of Proxima B rose above the horizon, their light struck the crystal formations surrounding the valley at precisely the right angle to create a spectacular phenomenon. Beams of refracted light converging on the sacred pool at the center of the settlement. The luminescent water began to glow with increasing intensity. It happens once every 67 years, Naya explained to the astonished ambassador. The convergence marks times of great change for my people. Elio raised his small blue arms toward the sky, trilling a sound that seemed to resonate with the crystal formations themselves. Through their bond, Reed felt the child's consciousness expanding, touching not just his mind, but reaching outward, connecting with the water, the crystals, the very fabric of this alien world. For a moment, brief but transcendent, Reed sensed every mind in the valley, human and Kirath alike, not their thoughts exactly, but their presence, their essential nature. Differences remained, but beneath them lay a fundamental sameness, the capacity for wonder, for growth, for connection. The vision faded as the moons continued their journey across the sky, the angle of light shifting, the convergence passing. But something remained, a lingering sense of possibility, of paths opening where none had existed before. Ambassador Lee stood silent for a long moment, then quietly, I understand now. What you're proposing isn't just a settlement or an alliance, it's a new way of being. Yes, Reed said simply. The council won't understand, not at first. She turned to face him fully. But they will, eventually. Elio tugged at Reed's hand again, pointing toward the Earth transport ship visible in the distance. Show them all. Reed smiled down at the child who had changed everything. One step at a time, little one. Even the greatest journeys begin that way. As they descended from the crystal formation, Reed caught sight of Wheeler watching them from the shadows, his expression troubled, but thoughtful. The colonel nodded once, not acceptance, not yet, but acknowledgement. It was enough for now. In the center of the plaza, humans and Kirath had gathered together, their faces illuminated by the still-glowing pool. Scientists compared notes with elders. Soldiers shared ration bars with warriors. Children, blue and pink-skinned alike, played games that needed no translation. It wasn't perfect. There were misunderstandings, tensions, moments of frustration on both sides. But there was also genuine curiosity, respect, the willingness to learn. Elio darted ahead, moving effortlessly between groups, a living bridge between worlds. His laughter, neither wholly human nor wholly Kirath, rang out across the plaza. What do you think the breaking and remaking truly meant? Naya asked quietly, watching her son. Reed considered. Perhaps it wasn't about shattering and rebuilding. Perhaps it was about breaking through barriers, preconceptions, limitations. He looked at the gathered peoples, no longer entirely separate, and remaking ourselves in the process. In the sky above, the stars of Proxima B, alien patterns that had become familiar, shone down on a settlement that should not have been possible. A settlement born from an infant's cry, a soldier's compassion, and a bond that defied explanation.